A woman declared legally incapable of making basic decisions for herself, yet fully capable of generating hundreds of millions of dollars for an entire system. For 13 years, Britney Spears was not allowed to decide what she ate, who she met, or whether she could have children. But she was still expected to perform, to smile, to work night after night on the world's biggest stages. The most disturbing part isn't that this happened, it's that it happened in public. And most of us watched it as entertainment. We tell them to expose how power operates when no one asks questions. So today we're not revisiting a pop scandal, we're opening a case. What really happened to Britney Spears? The world thought it knew Britney Spears. She was the smiling pop princess, the girl who danced effortlessly, laughed on cue, and never seemed to break. A symbol of youth freedom and unstoppable success. But that image was carefully constructed and tightly guarded. From the very beginning, Britney was framed as someone who had everything under control. Her confidence looked natural. Her energy looked limitless. To the public, she wasn't just talented, she was invincible. And invincible people, we assume, don't need protection. Yet behind the scenes, decisions were already being made for her. What she wore, how she spoke, when she worked, when she rested. The more successful she became, the less ownership she had over herself. Britney's loss of control didn't begin with a breakdown. It began with success. Every hit song tightened the grip around her life. Every appearance reinforced the idea that she existed to perform, not to choose. Because while the world celebrated a symbol of pop freedom, Britney was learning something very different, that her value came from obedience, not autonomy. A global icon of liberation, quietly living inside a system more restrictive than anyone was willing to admit. Britney's story begins far from stadium lights in the quiet town of Kentwood, Louisiana. It looks ordinary on the map. But for Britney Spears, time moved faster there than it should have. Her talent surfaced early, and so did expectation. While other children played, Britney rehearsed. While others rested, she trained, singing, dancing, perfecting herself again and again. Applause came quickly, and with it a lesson that would shape her entire life. By the time she joined Mickey Mouse Club, performance was no longer a choice. It was a requirement. Cameras rewarded precision, not hesitation. Smiles mattered more than feelings. Mistakes were edited out but remembered. This was where childhood quietly slipped away. Because in that world, love was conditional. You were praised when you delivered. You were invisible when you didn't. And slowly, something dangerous took root. Britney learned that stopping meant disappearing. That rest meant risk. That silence meant failure. When a child is taught that worth only exists on stage, the fear isn't falling, it's standing still. And that fear would follow her everywhere. At home, the pressure didn't come with spotlights. It came quietly through bills, instability, and the unspoken understanding that talent could become survival. Britney's family wasn't a cartoon villain. There was love, pride, and genuine hope. But there was also fracture. Her father struggled with alcohol, and the household finances could shift like sand. In a place where money meant security, success began to feel less like a dream and more like a duty. Because when adults are overwhelmed, they don't always protect a gifted child from responsibility, they lean on her. The schedule grows heavier, the expectations grow louder, and the child learns to carry things she was never meant to carry. Britney did what many children in unstable homes do. She tried to fix everything by being perfect. She worked. She performed. She kept moving because stopping felt dangerous, not just for her, but for the people she loved. The very thing that made her special also made her useful. And once someone becomes useful, it becomes easy to forget they are still fragile. When a child becomes the family's lifeline, childhood doesn't end in one moment. It ends in 1,000 small sacrifices until the child is gone and only the provider remains. Then the world met Britney in a single explosive moment. Baby One More Time, a global hit, a cultural detonation, and she was only 17. The song was catchy, the choreography was sharp, The video was unforgettable. But beneath the pop perfection was a bargain no teenager should ever have to make. The schoolgirl image didn't just sell records, it sold a version of Britney that people felt entitled to own. And overnight the lens changed. She wasn't simply a new artist with talent. She became a symbol packaged, projected, and consumed. Every headline pulled her further from childhood. Every camera angle turned performance into a body to be judged. The industry called it branding. The public called it fascination. But for Britney, it quietly rewired identity into merchandise. Success didn't introduce her to freedom. It introduced her to surveillance. The more famous she became, the less human she was allowed to be. From artist to product. From person to image. And once the world decides you are an image, it stops asking who you are when the lights go out. Fame didn't just follow Britney, it hunted her. Interviewers asked questions no teenager should ever have to answer in public about her virginity, her body, her purity, as if her worth could be measured like a headline. The camera wasn't there to understand her. It was there to take something from her piece by piece and sell it back to the world. And the paparazzi, they didn't observe. They invaded. Every parking lot became a stage. Every sidewalk became a trap. Flashbulbs erupted like lightning, not once, but in waves, morning, night, and again the next day. The message was clear. Privacy was no longer a right. It was a luxury she had lost forever. The media didn't simply report Britney's life. It began to shape it. When you know you're being watched, you change how you breathe, how you move, how you exist. And after enough years, you stop remembering what it feels like to be unseen. When the entire world believes it has the right to look inside you, you don't just lose peace. You lose escape. You lose silence. And eventually, you lose the safest place a human being can have a life that belongs only to them. Then came the romance America wanted to believe in. Britney and Justin Timberlake, two former child stars, turned into a national fairy tale. Matching outfits, red carpets, synchronized smiles. It looked like destiny. But behind the choreography was tension, jealousy, and a relationship lived under a microscope. Their private life became public property, and the pressure didn't just surround them, it seeped into them. When the relationship ended, the story didn't end with it. It was released. A hit song, Cry Me a River, arrived like a verdict, suggesting betrayal, inviting judgment, and handing the public a simple narrative. Britney was the villain. The headlines followed. The jokes followed. And Britney, silent, absorbed the punishment. Years later, she revealed a detail that reframed everything. She had become pregnant, and she said she felt pushed toward an abortion. Whether people agree, debate, or doubt the impact is unmistakable because it points to a pattern. Britney's life wasn't just being watched, it was being decided. Some choices were never truly hers, not in love, not in pain, and not in the moments that should have belonged only to her body and her future. Britney tried to start over the only way she knew how, by building a life that looked normal from the outside. A fast marriage, then another. And then motherhood, 2 sons, 2 tiny lives that suddenly mattered more than every chart position on Earth. But the storm didn't stop at the doorstep. It moved in. After childbirth, her body changed, her sleep vanished, and the emotional weight of postpartum depression pressed down in silence. And instead of privacy, she got flashbulbs. Instead of patience, she got accusations. Every photo became a trial: how she held her baby, how she walked, what she wore, whether she smiled correctly. Motherhood didn't soften the public, it sharpened it. The world expected a pop icon to be a perfect mother on command while being chased, shouted at, surrounded. Britney wasn't seen as a woman struggling. She was seen as a spectacle. A person in pain was turned into content. A mother trying to survive was reduced to a headline. And the more she asked for space, the more the cameras moved closer, until pressure stopped being background noise and became the air she breathed. By 2007, the pressure had stopped building. It had started crushing. Britney was grieving, exhausted, and surrounded, yet completely alone. The cameras didn't step back when she struggled. They moved closer, waiting for the moment she would finally crack, because a crack meant a story. And then it happened. She walked into a salon and shaved her head. Not as a stunt, not as a trend, more like an instinct. a desperate attempt to erase the version of herself that everyone felt entitled to touch. If they were going to take her image, she would take it back first. Days later, she swung an umbrella at a paparazzi car. The world replayed it like a comedy clip, like proof of madness. But step closer and the meaning shifts. What the public called a breakdown was also a boundary. A body saying enough. A mind reaching for any lever of control left within reach. This wasn't simply losing control. It was the sound of someone being controlled for so long that the only remaining language was shock. And once that moment went viral, the system didn't rush in with tenderness. In early 2008, Britney's crisis stopped being a tabloid arc and became a legal reality. After a highly publicized breakdown and psychiatric hospitalization, a Los Angeles court ruled that she was no longer capable of managing her own affairs. And then came a detail that still chills people who read the paperwork closely. The filings reportedly referenced dementia. Dementia while Britney was only 26. That single word carried weight far beyond a diagnosis. It helped justify an extraordinary conclusion: Britney would be placed under a conservatorship, a legal structure designed to remove a person's ability to make basic decisions. Her father, Britney Spears, was appointed as the primary conservator. This wasn't a manager taking over a career. It was a system taking over a life. One signature inside a courtroom can sound quiet, almost polite, but for Britney, that ink became a locked door. From that day forward, freedom wasn't something she could claim. It was something she would have to prove she deserved. Once the conservatorship began, Britney's world shrank while her workload exploded. On paper, she was deemed too impaired to control her money, sign contracts, choose her doctors, or make private decisions about her own body. Her life became a grid of permissions: who could visit, what medication she took, what she could buy, where she could go. Freedom was no longer a default. It was a request. And yet the stage lights never turned off. In the years that followed, Britney released multiple albums, went on major tours, and built a Las Vegas residency that demanded relentless precision week after week, 90 minutes at a time, under the pressure of a live audience and a global brand. How can someone be legally unfit to manage a life, but perfectly fit to perform at an elite industrial pace? How can a person be called incapable while being treated like the engine of a machine that never sleeps? Not competent enough to live, but competent enough to earn. And once you see that contradiction, you can't unsee it, because it suggests something darker than protection. A system that didn't merely keep Britney safe, it kept Britney productive. Under a conservatorship, control doesn't need chains. It uses paperwork, compliance, and consequences that happen quietly off camera. Britney's supporters would later claim that when she resisted, access was tightened, phones taken, visits limited, choices narrowed. Reports and court testimony over the years also raised concerns about medication, supervision, and the threat of losing privileges if she didn't cooperate. The details are debated, but the pattern is unmistakable. Her autonomy was treated like a reward, not a right. The system didn't have to hurt her loudly to hurt her deeply. It could call restraint treatment. It could call isolation stability. It could call obedience recovery. And the cruelest part is how reasonable it can sound, especially when it's wrapped in the language of protection. Some of the harshest control in modern life doesn't arrive with anger. It arrives with signatures, experts, and smiling assurances that it's all for your own good. That's what makes it so powerful. And that's what makes it so hard to escape. Because when a system believes it is right, it can do the most ruthless things and still sleep at night. For years, Britney's public presence felt oddly scripted: smiles that didn't reach the eyes, captions that sounded unlike her voice, short clips that repeated the same movements like a loop. At first, people laughed it off. Then they started to worry. And that's when the smallest details became electric. A yellow top, a certain phrase, a post that appeared right after a comment asking for a signal. To some, it was coincidence. To others, it felt like a message pressed against glass, someone trying to speak from inside a room they couldn't leave. Fans stopped being spectators and became investigators. They pulled court filings, timelines, and legal definitions. They compared dates. They highlighted inconsistencies. They asked why a woman too unstable to choose her own life could still be booked like a touring corporation. Then they did something the industry didn't expect. They showed up. Outside courthouses with signs and chants forcing cameras to point in a new direction. Free Britney didn't begin in a newsroom. It began in comment sections, group chats, late-night searches, ordinary people refusing to accept the official story. For the first time in Britney's career, power shifted. Not to the stage, not to the label, not to the lawyers, to the audience that finally decided to look closely. In 2021, the story finally reached a courtroom ending. After months of mounting public pressure and intense legal scrutiny, a Los Angeles judge terminated Britney Spears' conservatorship. 13 years of control over her finances, her personal decisions, her daily life were formally brought to an end. The moment the order was signed, the world called it freedom. But for Britney, freedom was not a switch you flip. It was a skill she had been denied the chance to practice. Because a life lived under permission doesn't instantly remember how to choose. In the months and years after Britney tried to rebuild on her own terms, marrying Sam Asghari, releasing new music, and publishing a memoir that reopened old wounds in public, and still the spotlight did not soften. Her social media posts sparked fresh debates. Is this healing rebellion or unresolved pain? The cage didn't disappear. It changed shape. The legal bars came off, but the digital ones remained screens, comment sections, non-stop interpretation. So the final question isn't whether Britney is free on paper. It's whether any of us truly know how to let her be free, and whether we are willing to look at what we demanded from her and call it what it was. This story began as a rise turned into a collapse and ended as a release but not a rescue. For 13 years, control was mistaken for care. Silence was mistaken for stability, and a human being was reduced to a system that worked because it kept producing. Today, Britney lives differently, louder, messier, uncomfortable to watch for some. But maybe that discomfort is the point, because freedom after years of permission doesn't arrive polished. It arrives uneven, raw, and unfinished. The story may be legally closed, but its meaning isn't. What we watched wasn't just the life of one woman, it was a test of how far power can go when applause drowns out accountability. If this story made you pause, share it with someone who still sees it as gossip. If you believe stories like this matter, like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Your questions are part of the record now. And stay with us for the next chapter, where we examine another life shaped and reshaped by forces hidden in plain sight. Because some cages don't disappear, they just learn how to look normal.